Hello, wotv fans. I'm Jackie Fox, and with the launch of Ever Crisis taking up a certain amount of my time, I mean, there's a lot of open and grind for that game, like getting your characters to level 50, things that you probably won't have to do again, that you have to do in that kind of keeping up with the Joneses, catching up your account to current kind of progression. It's taken a lot of time away from really extensively playing much arena. I've done my daily stuff, I've done my guild battles, but I haven't really been able to focus on arena and see what that's been like, which is unfortunate because there's been, I mean, at least for limited arena, the change to at least to exclude Vizier restores for your orbs, getting 5 fights for more Vizier, and having that all tied to the royal ranking system, meaning that the highest spenders, if they go all out, are the only people who really have a chance at getting to the top, all other things being equal, which they often aren't, especially because, again, these are the highest spenders. So I think that's really good, and I would love to see that way more often. I think that meta is far more entertaining, and I just think that was really cool. Maybe with a broader bonus unit pool, though, especially for limited events, it would be good to go back a little bit further to kind of expand the meta, because it seemed a little bit cramped from what I've heard. And this particular tier list that is on screen right now came from a video that was discussing a little bit of that. Some other things that I'll talk about when I post an arena video. There's some teams and units that I've had to build a little bit slower because of the crunch, that are just coming to fruition now, and I can kind of show those off now, and what the hits and misses were, and what's working, and what's only kind of working, and what I can salvage. And hopefully there's going to be a lot of interesting units for you, and I'll kind of point out some of the units I'm going to be using in that video that are on this list, and a lot of them come from the S tier. So we're in that video, I plan to be using Alaya, Sephiroth, Bradley, Roth, maybe, I don't remember if Addison Rae makes it in there, but she probably will, Perrine, and I could put in Edward. That would be relatively easy to do. And the reason that a lot of these units are where they are, and a lot of the decisions made in terms of this ranking of the units, not just general raw power, but who beats who. Some of that was in fact influenced by who the bonus units are now, and no matter how you slice it, a big determining factor in the meta right now is how you can hang with Alaya. So there's another thing though that I want to show you, and that is the current kind of meta rankings on what people are using in guild battle as well. And we're still seeing a huge determined Sephiroth dominance here. We're seeing 3 times the amount of Sephiroths on attack teams that we're seeing Alaya the Alabaster. So, with a lot of this being a little bit more arena-based, and a lot more of my, because I think, arena's a different beast, and I would prefer to give you, I would prefer to give you information for guild battle, because that can really be a little bit more of a trial for a team in that they have to go for 2 rounds. There are a lot of units that are a lot stronger in a format where they don't have to do that, especially LB dependent ones, things like that. So I really focus on what's good for guild battle. I think that's a really good test of where units are at. And it looks like in a lot of ways there's not a ton of adoption for Alaya yet. And that really colored the way that they did their rankings. Now, if you look at the very tippity top of the meta, you're seeing that Alaya is dominating, and Sephiroth barely even ranks. There's 4 or 5 times the Alayas that there are Sephiroths. And this colors a lot of the rankings I just showed you, and I will still walk you through a bit, just to give you a more brief version of that same video, just because that was in the context of an hour-long podcast in which they discussed a whole lot of other things up front, kind of buried this and still took a long time on it. And again, I think this is from this perspective, people who face this kind of thing. And let me change the defensive to kind of show you what the top 20 over there looks like as well. People who are going into this meta really can't be using Reraise. And the reason is that not only can Alaya dispel it, she can allow other people to dispel it, and somebody is going to hit you. If you're running Reraise on your team and you go up against Alaya, you might as well count that out in terms of things that are going to work in your favor. It just will not function. She turns it off, basically. So that's really difficult to run against, and again, colors a lot of the opinions from that. But the other thing that I want to show is that that's not nearly uniform, and even Will says this in his video. Like, there are many different metas, there are many different types of way of looking at this. You know, who's good in arena, who isn't, who's good in guild battle, and just etc. Who's good in PvE, who's good in guild raids. There's a lot of ways that units can be great. And, well, again, just if you factor out the top 100, you see a very different picture in which, let me just make sure I'm seeing like the whole, am I displaying the top 15? She's not even on the top 15. It's not as much of a concern. And because of that, a lot of units that were much lower rated on that tier list and on that video that operate around Reraise are a lot more viable, although we are still seeing kind of a dramatic Sephiroth dominance here, which is also a bit of a problem for Reraise as well. But just from 1LB, and especially in guild battle where, you know, units can be on their second attack, or, you know, there's a lot of reasons why potentially a Sephiroth wouldn't be able to pull that trick again. And even if he does, he may not hit the unit on your team that has Reraise, where it's a lot more assured with the way that Alaya goes about it, and a lot more crushing for Reraise units. So it's just worth pointing out units that have Reraise within that, because if you go outside of that meta, especially within guild battle, you'll notice that, you know, without the meta warping power of Alaya the Alabaster, the things that work are completely different. Or not completely different, but like there's a couple really popular strategies that actually still work, and a lot of really popular units that still make sense. And I think that this would probably adjust them by 1 or 2 ranks on this here tier list. So let's take a look, because I definitely agree that like the S tier is S tier. If you have Alaya, she is insanely powerful and kind of a new high watermark for this game. Another way of redefining the game also is Summer Glaciella if you have her, and she functions really well as a rainbow tank because her mechanic is her kind of aura ability is just a really great, at least against physical. It doesn't do anything for magic, but it makes her a really good physical tank in a lot of the same ways that Celeste is a really good magical tank, in that she can cover her allies, which isn't really a mechanic that we have. We have hate, but we don't have really cover mechanics, and the fact that she covers in an AoE around her is really good, especially considering like this is a thing that all tanks need, and I think a more effective way of conveying tanking in a lot of ways to this game. So it's really awesome to see a cover mechanic that's some next gen shit. And then for Alaya, other than being able to just invalidate Reraise in a lot of ways, her Stag Impact, which is like 3 jamming thrusts that can hit basically any corner of the map if she runs out into the middle with like 4 movement or something, she can just kind of wipe everyone else on the team, or at least hit them, cancel their ability activations, which, you know, as she gets higher and higher in concentration, because she's not a limited unit, people will be pulling her consistently for a while and able to build her up in a way that like we don't have with Sephiroth. A lot of people just jumped on that opportunity across the board. That really enticed a lot of people to play, so a lot of people have a strong Sephiroth that they've invested a lot of reincarnation into, and nothing is going to change that, you know what I mean, unless they give a lot of reincarnation resources so that we can get newer units to the same level that people who just put it all on Sephiroth can. He's still going to be dominant in the lower tiers of the game, in which, you know, there aren't as many units built up to quite that level, and there isn't going to be as much competition. But also looking at this, another point to be made here is that they kind of undervalue Roth a little bit. I think that Dialdo is certainly a pretty good tank in a lot of ways, but they just kind of flat out said that the higher S was better than the lower S in terms of where they put them on the screen, and that Roth was kind of a weaker tank in this meta, and that's probably true once Alaya hits everything. But again, she's still not quite here yet for more casual players, and I mean, you know, some of this isn't even all that casual, I would say, because we're still factoring in the top 100. I would have thought that would have brought in more Alayas, but it didn't. So, you know, her being, one of her mechanics being Reraise, a lot of her mechanics having a casting time, those are things that Alaya is going to counter fairly effectively. So she can turn off some of her abilities in a way that makes her a less effective tank against her, whereas Dialdo can deal with all of that and he's an elemental counter to her. But once we start filling out the rosters and start getting next level DPSs for more elements, the fact that, you know, one of these is earth and one of these is dark isn't going to make as big of a difference. And once we get, you know, a little bit broader, I think she's going to come back up. But in this particular moment, Dialdo is going to be a lot more important in the future. And in a lot of ways, the high tier meta can often indicate some of the future of the more casual meta. So maybe this is where where you could see the game shifting, especially as, again, Alaya is a big shifter of how things worked out on this tier list. She was a big filter for the meta, so that's coming, but it hasn't hit us yet, is kind of the point that I want to make. Just showing you again that this is what the more casual experience of the game looks like. And again, that's like guild rank 100 to 500, so those whole 400 right there. Addison Rae is still doing pretty good, and that's awesome because she was a free unit. Speaking of free units, though, Edward is actually doing a bit better than Perrine at the moment, especially because, you know, big lightning DPS. I mean, what can I say? Like, it was coming. But also, Edward is just a really good way of dealing some curveballs to teams that are coming into Alaya with Earth. Because as you can see, there is at least two parts of a strong Earth team in the S tier. It is, well, I mean, it's the it is tied for best representation. Nope. Yeah, tied three ways, actually. 2 water units, 2 earth units, and 2 dark units in the top tier. So you can kind of see that there's some counterplay. Water is really strong, but it's also really counterable because lightning is pretty strong, and that is making earth a bit stronger than it should be in a lot of ways, just by being privileged to be the counter to that really tough team. So that's really helping Bradley and Dialdo out a lot. And that is what's bringing Edward into the mix, which is awesome because this is 2 free units that we see here in the very tippity top tier. So free-to-plays that have been keeping up, you have some really cool options at your disposal. Moving into the A tier, I want to kind of make a few notes that evasion is still relatively viable here. King Mont continues to be a really strong fire tank and a really strong addition to fire teams. You're seeing him here with Yuffie, who is still a really great evasion curveball. Maybe not a full evade team because I don't remember. Did I miss him? I'm not sure. Oh, Sorrow's B tier. Okay. But even like Mont, Yuffie, Sorrow, that's pretty good. There's a lot of options because, and especially because, Alaya just isn't all that accurate, and unless you're running maybe Edward on your strike team, you don't have a high accuracy option necessarily. I mean, there is a guaranteed hit on Perrine, but that also, both of those things aren't necessarily going to work well with Yuffie. So that sure hit avoidance is kind of making her the most premium evasion unit by a whole tier. And that's just because of how good her matchup into a strong strike team, a strong modern strike team is. Also, there's a lot of lightning units here that are kind of being pulled up by their ability to support Alaya. So we're seeing Vega finally turn into kind of a almost top tier unit. Alphonse is really getting pulled up as a very powerful tank that also synergizes with the strike element of Alaya. we're also seeing that Lila the Bold, who just recently got her update, has become one of the more premium dark units to run. I think she even edged out, yeah, Dark Phoenix a tier below. And part of that, though, I want to say, part of the reason that Dark Phoenix is likely a tier below is that her survival mechanic is Reraise, and they're really heavily factoring against that, and that will get worse in the future even for us. But this isn't necessarily current. But also another thing to point out is that Uriel is quite a powerful unit as well. I think she fairly recently got upgraded, and she also fits into the strike meta and is a really good counter to just a number of different things in terms of physical resistances, but also just being able to deal some heavy damage to lightning units. She is another one of the earth units that's kind of being pulled up by Elias' presence, so she's worth investing into the near future. We also see kind of a number of ice units hitting this tier. The Slash brothers, both Reagan and Howlett, which the game has been very insistent on giving all of my accounts in free pulls. Also, Jaden the Celebrated, who kind of ditto, actually. I've gotten all 3 of these units on multiple accounts. I pulled Reagan actually 3 times this morning, only kept 2 of them, so all of my accounts now have a copy of Reagan. One of them was a retry pull. I tried to not get Reagan, and they gave him to me again twice in a row as my new UR for the pull. But we're also seeing Velas up here. Velas is a pretty excellent unit. And, you know, a unit that could be compared to Velas also makes it onto this list, and that's the new unit, Renoa, who, you know, as per my video, is just an excellent unit in that she can really deal with a lot of things. She's Earth, so that also privileges her quite a bit. You know, Earth kind of needs a healer. If you have Dialdo, Bradley, Renoa, that is an excellent Earth team. That'll really work out well for you because you have a tank that can just fucking soak up damage like crazy, and then you have kind of a quasi healer and just a really disruptive DPS who can easily turn the tables on people. So just units to look forward to. Lil Leela the Bold is a must-have awakening. I think she's kind of the new thing for Dark here and important. So if you didn't hop on that train previously, you absolutely should. Resnick is also a really good option for a lot of the same reasons of Renoa and Velas. So if you're running Lightning and you haven't somehow jumped on the Resnick train, because she's been incredibly good for a long time, it is absolutely time to do that. There is kind of a weak showing in a lot of ways for Wind. Of course, there is Edward, Joom, and Glaciella here, but I think that's still kind of a little bit of a weaker team. It has its matchups, and it definitely benefits from Earth being strong, but it is not nearly as strong as Earth. It squeaks by in that matchup in some ways. Edward himself is a stronger representative than they are collectively. Like, the Wind as an element is doing kind of poorly at the moment, and a good part of that is because of all of these high tier ice units that share the A tier with it. They make really good teams, and anytime it gets a chance to rise up, you know, it can run into some serious problems with them. So sometimes, especially in this meta, Wind is best splashed into your Lightning team as insurance against Earth. Moving into the B tier, we still see Skahal holding up, especially because having Courage isn't having Reraise base. However, he doesn't necessarily benefit from Elia being a tippity top, because the Halloween mask with its Reraise granting was a big part of what was keeping him relevant for a while. Like, that build of him was definitely pretty good. It did kind of run into Sephiroth issues, but this is I think a much more bigger and consistent issue for that build, which again was among his better. Maybe that frees up his TMR slot in some ways to do other things, but he still remains pretty relevant. Queen Macherie stays pretty tough. And also with Spicy Donut, I really want to shout this out, like his PvE video on Earth Evocation, she is a really, really big deal for that. So think of her for your PvE teams, especially if you have good Earth synergy, especially good Earth magic. Dark Fina is going to be a little bit better than this for reasons I mentioned before, so I'm going to skip past that, but she deserves to be a tier above. I would also say that, no, I don't, even with the re-raise being a factor, maybe Sylvia's A tier, maybe not. She's definitely like S tier for units that are still 120, but I'm not entirely sure that even factoring in re-raise puts her all the way up into A. But Sodley could probably make the jump. Sodley is also another interesting option for Wind, but again, Wind isn't in the greatest place right now, so it's not the best time. And again, investing in him is going to have a little bit of issues in the future as re-raise removal gets a little bit easier for some common units. Although, again, that is a phase that we will likely shift past as newer DPSs come out, and maybe less of the general pool of players is using just one strategy of Alaya. Although you would have thought that was Sephiroth, but, well. Anyways, moving on. Elena still keeps up, especially because of a lot of the things that I said about Yuffie, and the fact that Addison Rae is in the S tier. So Addison Rae and Elena is really the thing that is keeping Elena relevant. Elena needs Addison more than Addison needs Elena, though, and I think that's why Elena's in B. Also, you know, Addison does a lot more damage and is flexible into a lot of rainbow teams in a way that Elena isn't. Although Elena, I like Elena being a red mage, and they do have a lot of synergies together. Let's not pit them against each other. Miranda, though, is an 80 cost unit popping up into the B tier. Again, courage unit instead of re-raise. But I don't think that's getting her valued higher. I think she is genuinely a pretty good unit. Also, her counterpart, Sweetheart Miranda, I think, at least for right now, probably for the more casual audience, really deserves to be an A tier, and also is probably helping out other units like Bart and Stern. Oh shit, I forgot. Bart's A tier free unit. Excellent. Just a banger. He's tough and he hits really hard and he has follow-ups. Like, it's just what's not to love. He's an excellent unit. Also, courage unit over a re-raise unit, so that's going to benefit him into the future. A really good anchoring buddy group here for the light team between him and Stern. And then that works really well also with Miranda, although Miranda and Stern as well. Because Stern, you might even be able to push up a little bit higher. He is also a re-raise unit. I forgot about that. So maybe, I'm still not sure that makes him S tier. He is probably the strongest light unit he's the strongest unit for light. I think Addison Rae is probably the strongest light unit in that she's more flexible. But on a light team, I think maybe he is the strongest. And he makes a good combination with Addison Rae as well. Because then he can get courage and re-raise, which is really interesting. Let's see. Warrior of Light is kind of falling from a slightly more privileged position as HP bars are catching up with his. And we're also seeing Omnilus kind of catch up just a little bit. She hadn't been as relevant for Water, but she's really starting to catch on at the moment. I mean, like, there haven't been many times that she would have been paired up as highly as Astrius. Also, Rugia and Jaden are probably like the only gunners you're going to see on this list. For reasons that I should probably talk about in the arena video, so good reason to tune in for that. I am going to be talking about kind of game state stuff and also recapping some of the stuff from this live stream that I'm here telling you about. One of the things is that for ranged units, especially gunners, I mean, VCs aren't there for you, and there's all sorts of competitive disadvantages, and like they feel like these whole classes need balance updates to make them better. I mean, Irvine is coming in here at B tier already. I mean, he's a 90 cost unit, but still, you know, B tier. He has some serious issues in a lot of ways. Looking at the C, Halloween Lucia actually could hop up with her update. That should be coming soon. We should be getting that in a couple of weeks. And that really could pop her up quite a bit, I think. But I'm not sure how much of an upgrade she's going to get as a 70 cost unit. And then it's also interesting, especially with this particular meta, to see Noctis popping up. And again, once he gets his 140 upgrades here in global, maybe he'll even make it into the B tier as part of an Elia counter team. But it is almost certainly Elia that is pulling him up here. Even though, like, I would say right here isn't really that far up necessarily, but just to notice some free units here. Katone is really excellent. Like, she always surprises me how good she is as an 80 cost unit. She's not quite the anomaly that Skahal is, but she's still really amazing in the right composition, because certain teams are still just really weak to evade, and she is very evasive. She may have a lot of other weaknesses, but her general evasiveness is not one of them, and especially with the legendary Reliquary's weapon, she can be a one-off, like, super evasive unit for your team. Another free unit here on this tier is Ildira, but in addition to Ildira, we've also got Lucio and, well, actually Minwu, now that I'm looking at it, Minwu as well. So a lot of free units on this tier. Honestly, in building your teams, I would try to aim for anchoring yourself into one of these S units, and then building using probably A tier preferred, and then B. But honestly, it's not about using the most high tier units, it's about using the best strategy. So, you know, synergies between units is going to be really important. Also, noticing another thing, so there's also some big ice support in B, in that we have both of the missile units, who are probably some of the best missile units in the game, other than the ones that I mentioned earlier. So actually there are 4 missile units in that tier. A lot of gunners. Bow units are really suffering from just not having VCs. A lot of issues for bow units. But also Snow, even pre-update. So he could be getting considerably better into the future, maybe even an A tier ice tank again. And Grifford, who is pretty new and also only a 70 cost. Although this is still the same tier as Shalza, I think he is a little bit better, because again, these are ranked with the better things of that tier being up towards the top, and then kind of shifting the other people into the bottom row. And again, from what I was saying, you know, there are very few, there's only 2, there's Setia and Irvine in the top of B, and then 4 in the bottom of B. And these are all powerful units, it's just that kind of structural things are kind of fucking them out of the game, and there are less and less maps that they work on, because often they are inherently only good on certain maps to begin with. So a lot of issues there, but we'll talk about that in another video. I don't want this one to go over 30 minutes, or I haven't really made it all that much shorter, have I? And hopefully I can cut some of the rambling out of here as well, and I hope this gives you a better perspective, or maybe a more relevant perspective for the majority of you than, you know, what the top tier is like, as it is, as I said, quite different. I mean, just, I can put them side by side for you, really. What the top 100 is doing versus what the bottom 100 is doing, and it's just, it's radically different. Like, I mean, Sephiroth and Darkfina are still pretty much at the top of either one, which is kind of surprising. I mean, I guess she gets used a lot, but she isn't great. I mean, I fully believe that Lily the Bold is probably the better investment right now, and that a lot of people, you know, either have invested so heavily into Darkfina that it's hard for them to shift over, or just more people have built her up because she got her 140 so much earlier. But I do think that Lily the Bold is going to eventually overtake her, and that everyone is going to see a lot more Elia, and a subtle downshifting of certain Reraise units especially. But also some issues for casters, and in addition, just because of Elia and her strongest skill being an ability canceller, anyone who has a casting time has issues, and they've got bigger structural issues than that. Another thing I'll discuss in the arena video. So If you liked this, remember, like, subscribe, and check that link in the description. I do other stuff. I have other channels, podcasts, etc. that I do in addition to this. And the real moneymaker is the books. So if you could check out, like, literally put them in your cart and check out with them any of my books, both realism and fantasy, perfect for Final Fantasy fans and disaffected millennials, the kind of people who would probably be watching my video. So if you like me, if you like the content, then you'll probably like the books too. Hey, give them as a gift. I don't care. Working on new things all the time, so be sure to check that link and see what's good. I've been Jackie Fox. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.